Aarushi Patel, a brilliant 29-year-old teacher with dreams as big as her heart, thought she had finally found love. But Ryan Cooper, the boyfriend she once trusted, was about to turn obsession into deadly vengeance. Aarushi Patel was the kind of woman people noticed without her even trying. At 29, she had built a quiet yet fulfilling life in Chicago, teaching literature at a local high school. Her students adored her for the way she brought stories to life, connecting classic novels to real-world lessons about love, ambition, and heartbreak. Outside of work, she lived modestly in a cozy apartment decorated with soft lights, plants, and books that lined every corner. She spent weekends volunteering at community centers, tutoring underprivileged kids who reminded her of her younger self, ambitious, hopeful, and eager to prove something. Her parents, who had immigrated from India years ago, were proud of her achievements. Aarushi had worked hard to balance her cultural roots with her American upbringing, becoming a bridge between two worlds. Her life seemed perfectly steady, predictable even. She was the teacher who never missed a class, the friend who always showed up on time, and the daughter who called home every Sunday evening. To those who knew her, Aarushi represented calm and discipline, a woman who had everything under control. But beneath that calm exterior, she sometimes felt the weight of loneliness. Her long-term boyfriend, Ryan, was often distant, caught up in his dreams of becoming a musician. Aarushi supported him, but there were nights she wished for something more, someone who understood her drive, her need for emotional stability, and her desire for a life that felt complete. She told herself that love required patience, that Ryan would eventually find his purpose. What she didn't realize was that life was about to take a turn that would strip away every illusion of safety she had built, leading her down a path that would change everything forever. Ryan Cooper had always been the charming one in their relationship. When Aarushi first met him at a coffee shop near the school where she taught, he had been full of energy and big dreams. He played in small bars at night, writing songs about love, loss, and hope. His eyes sparkled with ambition, and his laughter was contagious. Aarushi admired his passion for music and how he could make even the dullest days feel exciting. In the beginning, he made her feel alive, reminding her that there was more to life than lesson plans and grades. But as the years passed, the magic began to fade. Ryan's music career never took off the way he imagined. Gigs became less frequent, and money was always tight. Aarushi began covering rent more often, buying groceries, and paying for the little things he couldn't afford. She didn't mind at first. She told herself that love meant helping each other grow. Yet, she couldn't ignore how Ryan's mood started to change. He grew frustrated, bitter even, each time she mentioned work or her students' success stories. He started sleeping late, missing auditions, and spending long hours scrolling through social media, comparing himself to others. When Aarushi encouraged him to try something new, he took it as criticism. Slowly, admiration turned into resentment. He began to see her not as a partner, but as a reminder of everything he wasn't achieving. Despite this, Aarushi stayed, believing he just needed time. But deep inside, Ryan's feelings had shifted from love to dependence. He couldn't imagine a life without her support, and the thought of losing her filled him with fear. That fear soon turned into something darker, an obsession that would only grow stronger with time. The evening Aarushi met Arjun Mehta was unplanned, yet it would become the turning point of her life. It happened at a charity fundraiser her school had organized to support education programs. The event was held in a downtown hotel ballroom, filled with soft music, laughter, and the scent of fresh flowers. Aarushi had been asked to give a short speech about her students, and though she wasn't fond of attention, her words impressed the audience. Among them was Arjun, a man in his mid-30s, confident, composed, and quietly observant. He approached her afterward to compliment her speech, speaking with the kind of calm certainty that immediately drew her in. Arjun was different from the people she usually met. He was the founder of a successful tech company and had made a name for himself through innovation and philanthropy. Yet, there was something grounded about him, an ease that made her feel comfortable. Their conversation was brief but effortless, and before leaving, he mentioned that he admired teachers, calling them the real builders of the future. Those words stayed with her. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed again through mutual acquaintances and local events. Each time, their connection grew stronger. Arjun's presence made Aarushi feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. He listened to her stories, remembered small details, and made her laugh without trying. In his world, she discovered a version of herself she had forgotten, a woman who could dream beyond routine. She didn't realize it yet, but this newfound connection would soon blur the lines between comfort and temptation. While she tried to convince herself it was harmless friendship, Ryan's absence in her life was slowly being replaced by the magnetic pull of someone far more dangerous to her heart. Arjun's world was unlike anything Aarushi had ever experienced. He lived in a high-rise apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, where the city lights glittered like scattered jewels on the water. Their first dinner together wasn't planned. He had invited her after a school event, insisting she deserved to celebrate her accomplishments. They dined at an exclusive rooftop restaurant with live jazz and candlelit tables. Aarushi felt out of place at first, surrounded by people in tailored suits and designer dresses. But Arjun's effortless charm put her at ease. He spoke about his travels, his struggles building his company from scratch, and the importance of giving back. Aarushi listened intently, fascinated by how someone so successful remained humble. When he asked about her teaching, she saw genuine curiosity in his eyes. That night, she realized he admired her passion more than anything she could wear or own. Soon, Arjun began introducing her to his circle of friends, entrepreneurs, investors, and artists. They welcomed her warmly, impressed by her intelligence and sincerity. Weekends once spent grading papers and watching movies turned into evenings filled with art shows, charity dinners, and late-night drives through the city. For the first time, Aarushi felt like she was stepping into the kind of life she had only read about. Expensive gifts followed, designer scarves, books signed by her favorite authors, a delicate gold bracelet he said reminded him of her grace. Each gesture felt thoughtful, never forced. But behind the charm and elegance, something began to shift inside her. The comfort she once found in Ryan's familiar world now seemed small and heavy. The luxury wasn't what captivated her. It was how Arjun made her believe she deserved more than the quiet life she had settled for. Aarushi knew the decision had been coming for a while, but when the moment finally arrived, it still felt impossible. One evening, she invited Ryan over to her apartment. The air between them was heavy, filled with an unspoken tension that had been building for months. She tried to find the right words, her voice calm but steady, as she told him she needed to end things. She said she wanted to focus on herself, her career, and her future. What she didn't say out loud was that her heart had already drifted elsewhere. Ryan sat in silence, unable to process her words. For years, Aarushi had been his constant, his emotional anchor, his safety net. Hearing her speak with such finality broke something inside him. He begged her to reconsider, promising he would change, work harder, do better. But her decision was firm. She had spent too long waiting for him to grow, and now she was ready to move on. When he realized she wouldn't take him back, Ryan's expression shifted from sadness to something darker. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. Aarushi sat there for a long time afterward, feeling both relieved and guilty. She told herself that time would heal everything, that he would eventually understand. But Ryan didn't move on. That night, he drove aimlessly through the city, consumed by anger and disbelief. To him, Aarushi wasn't just leaving a relationship. She was abandoning the life they had built together. The idea of her being with someone else, especially someone like Arjun, made his thoughts spiral. What had been a breakup for her became an obsession for him, one that would soon grow beyond control. Ryan's life began to unravel after the breakup. The apartment he once shared with Aarushi felt hollow, the silence pressing against him like a weight he couldn't escape. He would wake up in the middle of the night expecting her voice, only to be met with emptiness. His guitar sat untouched in the corner, covered in dust, while unpaid bills piled up on the table. Every corner of his home reminded him of her scent on the pillows, her handwriting on old notes, even a stray hairband he couldn't bring himself to throw away. At first, he tried to move on. He convinced himself it was temporary, that Aarushi just needed space. But when days turned into weeks and she didn't call, desperation began to take root. He started checking her social media, scrolling through her photos late at night, searching for clues about her life. Each smile she posted felt like an insult, each new picture a reminder that she was happier without him. He drove past her school, her apartment, and the coffee shop where they used to sit together for hours. He told himself he just wanted to make sure she was okay, but deep down, he was feeding an obsession. Friends noticed his behavior changing. The once easygoing musician had grown distant, withdrawn, and unpredictable. When they suggested he move on, he lashed out, insisting that Aarushi was confused and would return soon. He couldn't accept that she had chosen someone else. In his mind, she belonged to him. That thought became a dangerous fixation, blurring the line between love and control. What began as heartbreak was turning into something far more sinister, an obsession that would soon consume every part of his life. Aarushi tried to keep her relationship with Arjun private, knowing how fragile the situation with Ryan still was. She avoided posting anything online, choosing instead to enjoy quiet moments away from public eyes. But Arjun's world wasn't built on privacy. His life was constantly photographed, discussed, and analyzed by people fascinated with success and wealth. It was only a matter of time before their connection became visible to everyone. A picture of them together at a charity gala surfaced online, a simple shot of them smiling beside one another, but enough to set off a storm. Ryan saw the photo late one night while scrolling through social media. His heart stopped. Aarushi looked radiant in a deep blue dress, her hand resting lightly on Arjun's arm. In that single image, he saw everything he had lost, and everything he believed should still be his. Rage filled him, pushing away reason. He began spending hours online, searching for more pictures of them, reading articles about Arjun, and comparing himself to the man who had replaced him. Each discovery cut deeper than the last. Meanwhile, Aarushi tried to ignore the online whispers. Her colleagues began asking questions, some teasing her, others congratulating her. She brushed it off politely, but felt a growing unease. She hadn't told Ryan about Arjun, but she sensed he knew. She noticed small changes. Unfamiliar cars parked near her building, the feeling of being watched when she walked home. She told herself it was just paranoia, a side effect of guilt and anxiety. What she didn't realize was that Ryan's quiet obsession had found new energy. The image of her with another man had ignited something inside him, an uncontrollable need to reclaim what he believed was stolen from him. Ryan's world began to collapse under the weight of his own emotions. The jealousy that had once been a dull ache became an all-consuming rage. He spent his nights drinking, replaying memories of Aarushi in his mind until they twisted into something cruel and distorted. He couldn't stop imagining her with Arjun, laughing, dining, living the kind of life he had always wanted to give her but never could. The thought tormented him, keeping him awake for days. He started writing angry songs about betrayal and heartbreak, but none of them brought relief. Each lyric only deepened his bitterness. His social media turned dark. Friends who once saw cheerful posts about his music now found vague, angry messages filled with resentment. Some people forget who helped them climb, he wrote one night, followed by another post that read, "Love can turn poisonous when lies take over." His followers grew concerned, but Ryan ignored every attempt at help. He had convinced himself that Aarushi had been manipulated by Arjun's wealth, that she was trapped in a world she didn't belong to. He began driving past Arjun's building, watching from a distance. Sometimes he saw Aarushi leaving in elegant dresses, smiling, her happiness a knife twisting in his chest. His obsession deepened, feeding on the idea that she had chosen money over love. Ryan's friends stopped inviting him out, unable to handle his unpredictable moods. Alone with his thoughts, he started creating imaginary scenarios in which Aarushi returned to him, apologizing for everything. But reality offered no such comfort. Each day that passed without her voice, without her presence, pushed him closer to the edge. His heartbreak had transformed into hatred, and that hatred was quickly turning into a plan. Arushi's life began to change in visible ways after she and Arjun grew closer. The simplicity that once defined her world slowly gave way to quiet elegance. She moved into a new apartment in a modern building near the lake, surrounded by glass walls and filled with soft natural light. It was still cozy, but now it carried touches of luxury, fresh flowers in crystal vases, a painting Arjun had gifted her, and shelves lined with the books she loved most. She told her friends she had wanted a fresh start, a place that reflected who she was becoming rather than who she had been. Her days remained the same on the surface. She still taught her classes with enthusiasm and stayed late to help students prepare for exams. But her evenings looked different now. She and Arjun spent time attending art exhibits, dining at hidden restaurants, and talking about the future. He encouraged her to dream bigger, to start her own tutoring business, something she had always wanted but never dared to pursue. With his guidance and confidence, she began sketching ideas, researching potential spaces, and imagining a name for her company. For the first time in years, Aarushi felt in control of her destiny. Yet, beneath the growing excitement, there were small, unsettling moments she couldn't quite explain. Sometimes, when she walked to her car after work, she felt eyes on her. Once, she noticed her apartment door slightly ajar, though nothing seemed missing. She brushed it off as carelessness, convincing herself she was just adjusting to new surroundings. But deep inside, an uneasiness stirred, a faint whisper that not everything from her past had truly been left behind. While Aarushi moved forward, someone else was quietly slipping further into darkness. It started with a single call in the middle of the night. Aarushi woke to the sound of her phone vibrating on the bedside table. When she answered, there was only silence on the other end. She waited, thinking it might be a wrong number, but no one spoke. After a few seconds, the line disconnected. She shrugged it off as a prank and went back to sleep. But the calls continued. Sometimes once a week, sometimes several times in one night. Each time, there was nothing but silence. No breathing, no background noise, just a cold, empty connection that left her uneasy. At first, Aarushi tried to ignore it. She changed her ringtone, put her phone on silent, and told herself it was just a random nuisance. But soon, strange things began happening outside her apartment. She noticed unfamiliar footprints near her car on rainy mornings. Once, she came home to find her welcome mat turned upside down, and another time, a small scratch on her door that hadn't been there before. Then came the note. One morning, as she walked to her car, she found a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. The words were short and chilling. "You can't hide forever." Her heart pounded as she looked around the quiet parking lot, but no one was there. She showed the note to Arjun, who insisted on calling the police, but without a clear suspect or proof, there was little they could do. The officer advised her to stay cautious and report anything unusual. Aarushi nodded, trying to stay calm, but that night she barely slept. For the first time, she realized that someone out there wasn't just watching her, they were waiting. The following week, Aarushi couldn't shake the feeling that someone was constantly nearby. The uneasiness followed her everywhere, on her morning drive to school, during grocery runs, even when she sat by her window reading at night. One evening, after another silent call, she decided to check the building's security footage with the help of her neighbor, Mr. Jensen, who managed the complex. What they found made her blood run cold. The grainy video showed a figure standing near her car just after midnight. The person wore a dark hoodie, hands buried in the pockets, and stood still for several minutes before disappearing into the shadows. Aarushi wanted to believe it was just coincidence, maybe a stranger passing by, but her gut said otherwise. She reported the footage to the police, hoping they would take it seriously this time. The officer who came seemed sympathetic but unconvinced, saying it could have been anyone. There were no clear features, no license plate, no solid evidence. He suggested she change her locks and be cautious. Trying to regain normalcy, Aarushi installed new deadbolts and a small camera above her door. Still, sleep no longer came easily. Each creak of the floorboards or gust of wind outside made her heart race. Sometimes, she thought she saw a shadow move near the window, but when she looked again, there was nothing. Arjun offered to have her move into his place, but she declined, not wanting to bring trouble into his home. She assured him she was fine, even though deep down, she wasn't. The sense of being watched had burrowed into her mind like a whisper she couldn't silence, and the quiet nights that once comforted her now felt like the most dangerous hours of all. When Arjun proposed, it felt like something out of a dream. They had taken a weekend trip to Lake Tahoe, a quiet escape from the chaos of the city. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the sound of water lapping against the shore. Aarushi hadn't expected anything more than a peaceful getaway, but Arjun had other plans. On their second evening, as the sun set in a wash of gold and orange, he handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate diamond ring, simple yet breathtaking. For a long moment, she couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions, joy, disbelief, love, and the haunting thought that she might finally be safe. Arjun promised her a new beginning, a life where she wouldn't have to look over her shoulder. He told her they would build a future far from the shadows of the past. Aarushi said yes with tears in her eyes, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in months. For the first time since the breakup, she allowed herself to believe that everything dark had been left behind. They spent the rest of the weekend celebrating quietly, walking by the lake and talking about their plans, where they would live, what kind of wedding they wanted, how they would blend their worlds together. Yet, even amid the joy, a small flicker of fear lingered in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but sometimes she felt that happiness came too easily, that it invited envy. What neither of them knew was that while they toasted to their future, Ryan had already found out about the engagement. He had been following every update, and now, seeing her wear another man's ring was the final push that shattered what little sanity he had left. When Aarushi and Arjun returned to Chicago, everything seemed perfectly ordinary at first. They were still glowing from the engagement, filled with excitement and plans. Arjun had meetings to attend, so Aarushi returned to her apartment alone, intending to pack up a few belongings before spending the weekend at his place. But as soon as she stepped through the door, she felt something was off. The air felt heavy, as though someone had been there recently. Her heart raced as she scanned the room. Everything appeared in its place, until her eyes fell on the vanity table. Her favorite perfume bottle lay shattered on the floor, glass scattered like tiny stars across the wood. She crouched to clean it, trying to reason with herself. Maybe she had knocked it over before the trip and forgotten. But then she noticed the photograph on her bedside table. The picture of her and Arjun taken in Lake Tahoe had been ripped cleanly in half. The half showing Arjun was missing. A chill crept through her body. She checked the doors and windows, but there were no signs of forced entry. Whoever had come inside had done so quietly, carefully, leaving just enough evidence to send a message. She called Arjun immediately, her voice trembling, and he urged her to file a report. The police arrived within the hour but found nothing helpful. No fingerprints, no broken locks, nothing stolen. They advised her to stay with someone for a few days, suspecting it might be a personal threat. Aarushi agreed to move in with Arjun temporarily, though she said little about how deeply shaken she felt. That night, as she stared at the half-empty frame on her dresser, she couldn't escape the feeling that someone had been close enough to touch her life and wanted her to know it. ChatGPT said, Ryan's life had reached a point of complete collapse. After losing his apartment, he was now living out of his car, moving between parking lots and cheap motels. The once hopeful musician had become a shell of himself, consumed by bitterness and regret. Empty bottles littered the back seat, and his guitar, once a symbol of dreams, now sat untouched and broken. He spent his nights scrolling endlessly through Arushi's social media, even though she rarely posted anymore. Every small glimpse of her life, an old picture, a mention in a school newsletter, fueled his anger. He convinced himself she had betrayed him, that everything she was enjoying should have been theirs. The engagement photo he found online was the breaking point. Seeing her hand resting in Arjun's, the diamond ring sparkling under perfect lighting, sent him spiraling into rage. In his distorted mind, Aarushi hadn't just left him, she had humiliated him. He began talking to himself, rehearsing imaginary conversations where he accused her of destroying his life. Some nights, he drove past Arjun's apartment building, staring up at the lights, trying to guess which window might be hers. He told himself he only wanted to talk to her, to make her understand what she had done. But his thoughts grew darker with every passing day. He started keeping notes in a small black journal, writing out everything he felt: anger, heartbreak, revenge. Those pages became his obsession, filled with plans and thoughts he would never dare to say aloud. What began as heartbreak had twisted into something far more dangerous. The line between love and hate had vanished completely, and in his growing madness, Ryan started to believe that if he couldn't have Aarushi, no one should. The day Ryan finally confronted Aarushi began like any other. She had stayed late at school, grading essays in her classroom as the sky turned orange outside. By the time she packed up and walked to her car, the parking lot was nearly empty. She didn't notice the figure sitting inside a nearby vehicle, engine idling, eyes fixed on her every move. Ryan had been waiting there for hours, rehearsing what he wanted to say, his hands trembling with a mix of fear and rage. When she reached her car, she found a folded piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. The note read, "I'll never let you go." Her heart pounded as she looked around, scanning the dim lot for anyone nearby, but it was empty. She rushed inside her car, locking the doors, and drove home in silence, the words echoing in her mind. That night, she showed the note to Arjun, who immediately insisted on calling the police. When the officers arrived, they listened carefully but didn't treat it as an urgent threat. One of them explained that unless there was direct evidence or physical harm, there wasn't much they could do. Aarushi filed an official report, but it brought little comfort. The officer promised to increase patrols near her school, though he admitted the gesture was more for reassurance than real protection. Aarushi tried to return to her normal routine, but fear had started to shadow every part of her life. She began checking the locks twice before sleeping, looking over her shoulder when walking alone, and jumping at every unexpected sound. Ryan's presence was invisible, but she could feel it closing in, an unseen force growing stronger, waiting for the right moment to strike. Arushi's engagement party was meant to be the happiest night of her life. Held at an upscale hotel ballroom overlooking the city, it was filled with laughter, music, and people who adored her. The room glowed with soft lights and gold decorations, the air thick with celebration. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to toast the soon-to-be couple. Aarushi wore a shimmering gold sari, her hair elegantly pinned, and her smile radiant. To everyone watching, she looked like a woman who had finally found her perfect ending. Yet beneath the glittering joy, a faint uneasiness lingered, a quiet whisper she couldn't ignore. Throughout the night, she occasionally felt the weight of someone's gaze. Every time she turned toward the large windows, she caught a flicker of movement outside, though the hotel's bright lights made it impossible to see clearly. She brushed it off, telling herself she was just tired. Arjun noticed her unease and squeezed her hand, promising everything was fine. She nodded and tried to enjoy the evening, laughing with guests, posing for photos, and thanking everyone for coming. But across the street, hidden in the shadows of a narrow alley, Ryan stood motionless. He had been watching since the start of the event, dressed in dark clothes, his eyes fixed on the ballroom. From a distance, he could see her spinning and smiling under the lights. Her laughter carried faintly through the music. In his mind, the celebration wasn't a symbol of love, it was betrayal on display. As the night wore on, his anger hardened into resolve. He told himself that she had chosen this path, that she had forced him to act. To him, the party wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something irreversible. In the days following the engagement party, Aarushi tried to settle back into a sense of normalcy. The celebration had been beautiful, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At night, when she closed her eyes, she could still sense eyes watching her from the darkness. Arjun, concerned about her growing anxiety, hired private security to patrol near her apartment and escort her to her car after work. She appreciated the gesture but felt guilty, insisting she didn't want to live in fear. She needed time to think, to clear her head before the wedding. Against Arjun's advice, she decided to spend a few days alone at her apartment. Those quiet days began peacefully. She spent her time organizing her classroom materials, finalizing her wedding guest list, and journaling about her hopes for the future. But as the week went on, small disturbances began to creep back into her life. She'd hear faint footsteps outside her door late at night, followed by silence. Once, she woke to the faint sound of music playing somewhere nearby, a song Ryan used to sing. She told herself it was just her mind playing tricks, that the past couldn't touch her anymore. Arjun called every night, his voice filled with concern. He offered to pick her up, but she assured him she was fine and would come over in a few days. She didn't want to seem fragile. Yet deep inside, unease clawed at her chest. The city lights outside her window, once a symbol of safety, now looked like a sea of distant warnings. She didn't know it then, but those final days alone were leading her closer to the night that would end everything. The night when her fears would finally come true. The night of the storm began quietly, with only the distant rumble of thunder echoing across the city. Aarushi had been alone in her apartment, finishing some lesson plans for the following week. Rain began tapping against the windows, soft at first, then growing heavier as dark clouds rolled in. She watched from her living room as water pooled along the streets, reflecting the glow of streetlights. Despite the storm, she felt a small sense of calm, convinced that the rain would wash away the unease that had lingered for days. Around midnight, a sudden crash startled her. Glass shattered somewhere nearby, followed by a loud bang from the hallway outside her door. Her heart raced as she peered through the blinds, but all she could see was rain streaking the windows and shadows flickering along the walls. She tried calling Arjun, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The storm masked every sound, and for the first time in weeks, she felt utterly alone. Neighbors later recalled hearing loud thuds, though no one could identify the source. When morning came, Aarushi still hadn't returned to work. Her car remained parked outside, rain-soaked and untouched, but she was nowhere to be found. Police were alerted when she failed to show up for school, and her neighbors reported seeing the shattered glass and signs of disturbance in her apartment. The storm had passed, leaving behind a city washed in gray light. But inside her apartment, the scene told a different story: signs of struggle, disarray, and a presence that was no longer invisible. It was the first real indication that Aarushi's life had been violently interrupted. What had started as an ordinary night had become a turning point, the moment when fear materialized into tragedy. When the police entered Aarushi's apartment that morning, the scene was chilling. Rainwater still dripped from the windowsill, mingling with the shards of her shattered perfume bottle and the scattered remains of overturned furniture. Aarushi lay motionless on the living room floor, her body contorted in a way that spoke of sudden violence. There were signs of struggle: a toppled chair, scratches along the walls, and broken items strewn across the hardwood floor, but no clear indication of forced entry. Whoever had attacked her had done so with precision and familiarity, moving quietly and efficiently. Detectives carefully documented the scene, photographing every detail. Her engagement ring was missing, a glaring absence that suggested personal motive. The apartment, otherwise orderly, carried the eerie quiet of a life interrupted. Investigators noted the lack of defensive wounds, which hinted that Aarushi hadn't seen her attacker in time to react. The room smelled faintly of rain and perfume, a haunting reminder of the life that had been abruptly stolen. Arjun was called immediately, and his arrival brought both shock and sorrow. Seeing the apartment in disarray, the remnants of a life filled with hope and plans, left him speechless. He knelt beside her, unable to comprehend the sudden violence that had taken someone so full of light and promise. The officers began questioning neighbors and reviewing nearby security footage, searching for any clue. But the storm and the quiet of the early morning had left little evidence. Aarushi's disappearance from the world she had known was now officially a crime scene, a puzzle that demanded answers. What had seemed like a series of ominous warnings had culminated in the ultimate tragedy, leaving friends, family, and the city to grapple with the reality that she was gone, and that the person responsible had acted with chilling intent and determination. Detectives immediately focused on the last person known to be connected to Aarushi, Ryan Cooper. His name had come up repeatedly in conversations with her friends and coworkers, and his recent behavior suggested a growing obsession. When investigators traced his phone records, they found that his device had pinged near Aarushi's apartment the night of her disappearance. The evidence wasn't conclusive, but it was enough to place him under heavy scrutiny. Ryan was located at a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. When police arrived, he appeared disheveled and evasive, claiming he had simply been in the area running errands. His clothes were stained, his hands shook, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made the officers uneasy. He insisted he had nothing to do with Aarushi's disappearance, yet small details in his story didn't add up. He couldn't convincingly explain why he had been near her apartment at the time investigators were certain the attack occurred. The detectives began combing through Ryan's belongings, searching for anything that could link him to Aarushi or her missing ring. They found a car he had been using to travel between locations, and inside, hidden under the passenger seat, was an item of personal value to Aarushi, her engagement ring. The discovery left no room for doubt. Ryan had been involved, and the pieces of his obsession, his resentment, and his anger were now taking shape into a clear narrative of premeditated violence. As officers prepared to arrest him, Ryan remained strangely calm, almost as if he had anticipated this moment. He was handcuffed and read his rights, but there was no immediate confession. Still, the presence of Arushi's ring in his possession confirmed what investigators had long suspected. The man who once professed love for her had crossed a line from heartbreak to deadly intent, and the investigation had finally caught up with him. Once Ryan was in custody, investigators began the painstaking process of examining his digital life. His phone and computer were seized, revealing a trove of deleted messages, search histories, and notes that painted a chilling portrait of obsession. Hundreds of messages sent to Aarushi over the months after their breakup contained a mixture of pleading, jealousy, and veiled threats. Some were written in the heat of anger, others carefully crafted to provoke fear. The language escalated over time, from desperate attempts to reconnect to declarations that she could never escape him. Further scrutiny uncovered searches that suggested premeditation. Ryan had looked up phrases such as tracking someone without them knowing, how to find out someone's location, and disturbingly, how to get away with murder. Investigators pieced together that his obsessive behavior had grown increasingly calculated, moving beyond emotional instability into the realm of intent and planning. Each search, each message, revealed his fixation on controlling Arushi's life even when she had tried to move on. Private detectives working with the police traced his movements through timestamps on messages and online activity, confirming that Ryan had been near Arushi's apartment multiple times in the days leading up to the attack. The timeline aligned with broken locks, mysterious calls, and the shredded photograph found at her apartment. When confronted with this digital trail, Ryan's demeanor shifted. He initially tried to downplay his actions, claiming he had only been worried about her. But the overwhelming evidence of his obsession, combined with his physical possession of Arushi's engagement ring, left investigators with no doubt. The digital footprints, once hidden in deleted files and forgotten searches, became the key to understanding not only his motive but the dangerous escalation from heartbreak to murder, revealing a mind consumed by jealousy and rage. The arrest of Ryan Cooper marked a turning point in the investigation. When police arrived at the rundown motel where he had been hiding, he was calm, almost eerily so. He didn't resist, and there was a strange detachment in his eyes as he was handcuffed. Investigators had already gathered enough evidence to link him to Arushi's disappearance, but now they needed to establish a clear narrative of what had transpired that night. Inside Ryan's motel room, officers found additional items connecting him to the crime. Clothing with traces of Arushi's DNA, fragments of paper matching torn notes she had received, and other personal belongings indicated he had been inside her apartment. The engagement ring, recovered from his car days earlier, was a damning piece of evidence, and it left no question about his intent. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of the dangerous obsession that had been building for months, escalating into a violent and fatal encounter. As Ryan was read his rights, he remained eerily composed, almost as if he had expected this moment to come. Officers noted his posture, the calm in his voice, and the lack of remorse in his eyes. While the physical evidence was strong, they knew the psychological evidence, his obsession, the threats, and the digital trail, would play a critical role in the case. Ryan was transported to the city's detention center, where investigators began a more thorough interrogation. With each step of the arrest, it became evident that the months of stalking, threats, and escalating obsession had all led to this inevitable conclusion. The man who had once professed love had crossed the ultimate line, turning his heartbreak into a deadly act. With the perpetrator in custody, the investigation shifted from searching for answers to preparing for justice, and the city collectively exhaled, knowing the person responsible had finally been caught. The interrogation of Ryan Cooper was intense and revealing. Sitting in a small, stark room with a single overhead light, he was confronted with the evidence that had been collected over weeks: messages, phone records, photographs, and the items found in his car and motel room. At first, he remained silent, staring at the table, as if the weight of what had happened hadn't yet reached him. Investigators began presenting each piece of evidence carefully, documenting his reactions, and noting the tension that grew in his hands and jaw. Eventually, his composure began to crack. Under the relentless questioning, Ryan confessed to being near Arushi's apartment that fateful night. He described confronting her, begging her to return to him, to understand that she had made a mistake leaving him. His voice shook as he admitted that when she refused, something inside him snapped. The calm, obsessive planning that had characterized his behavior in the preceding months spiraled into violence. He claimed he hadn't intended to kill her, that it had happened in a moment of uncontrollable rage, but the meticulous preparation and the steps he had taken to monitor and stalk her made the confession chillingly real. Investigators noted the contradictions in his statements. He admitted to the act, but the carefulness of his actions suggested premeditation. He described hiding, following her, and tracking her movements, which painted a picture of obsession escalating into lethal intent. Ryan's confession brought a mixture of relief and horror to those following the case. Relief that the truth was finally out, and horror at the extent of his fixation. The man who had once professed love for Aarushi had methodically planned and executed an act that ended her life. What began as heartbreak had transformed into murder, leaving investigators to piece together the timeline of obsession, anger, and fatal consequences. The aftermath of Arushi's death was devastating, not only for her family and friends, but for the entire community that had admired her. Arjun was inconsolable, struggling to comprehend how someone so full of life, hope, and ambition could be taken so violently. He spent hours in the apartment she had once called home, touching the belongings she had left behind, each item a reminder of what had been lost. He channeled his grief into creating a scholarship fund in her name, dedicated to helping young teachers pursue their dreams. It was his way of ensuring that her legacy lived on, even in the shadow of tragedy. Arushi's students and colleagues held a vigil at her school, leaving flowers, candles, and heartfelt notes in her memory. They spoke of her kindness, her dedication, and the way she had inspired them to strive for more, to believe in themselves even when life seemed difficult. Teachers who had worked alongside her remembered her as a voice of calm and reason, someone who could see potential in every student. The community mourned not only the loss of a life, but the loss of a guiding presence, someone who had quietly shaped the lives of many without ever asking for recognition. Friends and family grappled with guilt and disbelief, wondering if there had been signs they missed or warnings they should have noticed. The tragedy left an emptiness that could not be filled. Yet amid the grief, there was a determination to remember her for who she was, a brilliant, compassionate woman whose life had been stolen too soon. The case became a reminder of the fragility of life and the dangers of obsession. Arushi's story haunted those who knew her, but it also inspired action, increased awareness of stalking, the importance of vigilance, and the lasting impact one person can have on the lives of many, even after they are gone. The trial of Ryan Cooper captured the attention of the entire city. The courtroom was packed on the first day, with reporters, friends, and family all seeking answers to a tragedy that had left so many shaken. Arushi's parents sat quietly in the front row, their faces pale, hands clasped tightly together. Arjun attended every session, a steadfast presence, determined to see justice done. The case was straightforward in many ways: physical evidence, digital records, and Ryan's own confession. But the emotional weight of the trial made each day feel heavier. Prosecutors laid out the timeline of events with meticulous detail. They described Ryan's growing obsession, the months of stalking, the threatening calls, and the carefully orchestrated moments that led to the fatal encounter. Photos, notes, and digital footprints were presented as evidence, each one painting a chilling picture of how heartbreak had transformed into deadly intent. Witnesses recounted the ominous signs, the notes Aarushi had received, and Ryan's escalating behavior. Ryan's defense attempted to frame the crime as a momentary lapse of judgment, claiming emotional instability and heartbreak drove him to act. But the extensive planning, the tracking, and the possession of Arushi's engagement ring contradicted any notion of impulsivity. The jury listened carefully, absorbing the evidence that detailed not only the crime itself but the months of psychological torment that preceded it. After days of testimony, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. The sentence was severe, reflecting the gravity of his actions. Justice for Aarushi was legally served, but the emotional scars remained. Her family and Arjun found some solace in the outcome, yet the loss was permanent. Arushi's life, though cut tragically short, became a lasting story, a reminder of the destructive power of obsession, the fragility of safety, and the importance of vigilance in the face of danger.